All right, listen carefully. A clip from the PBD podcast has been circulating where Terrence Howard says Bitcoin is going to die. Now, before we react emotionally, we need to break down this from a financial and macro perspective, not from hype or tribal thinking. Because every single time a new financial technology appears, whether it was the internet, credit cards, or digital payments, the first reaction from many people is skepticism. And in markets, skepticism actually matters. Bitcoin today sits at the center of a multi trillion dollar global financial conversation involving hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds, banks, and now even government regulation. So, when someone says Bitcoin is going to die, the real question becomes, are they looking at it from a technological standpoint, a monetary system standpoint, or just a personal belief about what money should be? Because right now, institutions like BlackRock, Fidelity, and major asset managers are doing the opposite. They're building financial infrastructure around it. That doesn't mean Bitcoin is guaranteed to succeed forever, but it does mean the conversation is much bigger than opinions. So, what we're going to do is listen to what he says, then we'll analyze whether the argument holds up in the real financial system. Roll the clip.
And precious metals is the only thing you can trust now. So silver.
What's your position with Bitcoin? Where are you at with
Bitcoin is going to die. I don't mess with it.
You think Bitcoin is going to die?
Oh,
you touch nothing with crypto?
I don't touch it.
Tell me why you think it's going to
Well, I just got a call from somebody a couple of days ago and said, hey, if you got 25 million, you can make 75,000. I just want to put it inside of an account to do some stuff. And this is a friend of mine. And I was like, do you realize that Bitcoin is still based on fiat? It's still and because the dollar is decreasing in its value, because the uncertainty of war around, nobody wants their money in something that can be wiped out with a push of a button somewhere. I've stayed free and clear of it because it's been dropping a great deal. I think it's at $61,000 now.
Yeah, but it went from 18 to 40 to 60 to 125.
Mm-hmm.
And it typically goes through the process. If you do a 5-year, if you go to a 5, and by the way, I have less than 1% of my portfolio in Bitcoin. So it's not like I'm a pro Bitcoin guy that's saying this to you. Go to Max, Rob. Go to Max if you look at it. If you look at what the second one looks like as the first one, do you see that?
Yeah.
It looks like a twin.
Yep.
So that means we got, we may be either at the bottom or it could go a little bit lower. But again, patterns change, but we'll see what happened with that. What concerns you the most? You were saying all these things. My challenge is if all these years these presidents did everything to strengthen China. Nixon opened it up, and China went from being nobody to they were worried because Soviet Union was too powerful and they could catch up. So they gave power to China. They opened it up because they wanted China to beat Russia. Well, then China didn't just beat Russia and passed up and became number 2, and now it could potentially compete with us, right?
Oh,
So the number one creator of commerce for these countries has been us. Why? America's been sold by a lot of presidents to other countries. So finally you got a guy that comes in that's like, yeah, I don't know if I like these deals. All these deals favor more the other countries than us. But to be able to put the deals in place is a very hard thing to do and to be able to pull off. He's trying to do it all of it at the same time. There's a 90% chance it's not going to work.
No.
Well, but the 10%, if it does, it protects you and Americans long term. Do you believe that way or no?
Well, his ideals and approach would have worked 40 years ago when you had the dollar dependency that every other country, you know, if you wanted to trade something, you had to have US dollars. So it kept our economy stable and strong. We could print as much money as we wanted to because we can always borrow money at very low rates because everybody wanted to do business with us. But now that the US dollar has lost, it's no longer being, it's turning into the sterling pound. For 100 years, that was the money thing. But now we can't push the things or use the force that we were using 40, 50 years ago because the dollar is no longer necessary in the world. So we have to take a more diplomatic approach to doing things. I appreciated the strength by which he came out and was like, hey, NATO, you got to pay your fair share. Hey, Canada, you've been taking advantage of us for years, with these trade agreements. China, you're doing the same thing. But we don't have the staying power that we had before. It's a global economy now. So when a major portion of that global economy is being blocked up with trade embargoes and tariffs and all of that, when everybody is talking, now China is like, okay, great. Keep playing your game. I'm going to keep the Belt and Initiative going out there. I'm going to keep giving to these countries that you're turning your back on. I'm going to keep giving to them. I'm going to and not ask them to change their constitution. I'm not going to force them into anything. I'm going to keep things as good as possible with them. China's doing the smart move because now all of these countries is turning on the U.S. and turning to China. Hey, China, you support us now. Even Greenland, wants to have talks with China. So we have to change our tactics and get back to making friends and being partners on the world stage and instead of isolation, because the isolation, I love the strength in him. But there's a time for finesse and there's a time for brute force. And what happened in the Straits of Hormuz? Is that right?
Yep.
Here we're about to pounce on Iran because of Israel not wanting to maintain our power there. But what happens? Well, now China sends its little boat, its ships in there. Russia sends their ships in there, and there's a standoff.
What do you think is going to end up happening?
The U.S. knows that we cannot strike Iran without those ships, all of them being wiped out and starting this world war. There's going to have to be a de-escalation of that because Iran is no longer just an isolated country without anyone helping it. Now it has the support of our two biggest rivals. And it has the support of everyone that an enemy of my friend, an enemy of my enemy is my friend. So they're all turning to Russia, like Burkina Faso turned to Russia, to ask for its help. Because why? The colonialists are still trying to move the stuff that they were doing before against Ibrahim Traore, President Traore, who was trying to unify Africa and saying, you know what, you're not going to take my gold and process it in Canada and then take it over and put it in the vaults in France. No, this is the gold that belongs to my people. And they're going to make a stand for their position and their gold. So what does Russia do? Since the U.S. is supporting France in this move, Russia goes and makes alliances with President Ibrahim Traore. Now that the war has just started and pushed off, I look forward to seeing how Russia follows through with supporting that. But I'm like, the African nations are all supposed to gather together, but we are so used to being colonialized, of looking down at the ground and, okay, here comes the Europeans. We've got to, it's like, no, they've been taking advantage of Africa because in order for the rest of the world to remain fluid, they need to be able to buy cheap and raw materials from Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa has to maintain and have to be impoverished. And then they use all of their things of, we're going to give you some money, but that money is only to keep them in that impoverished state and keep regimes in place that's going to allow the continent to continue to be raped. But if any moment Africa stands up and demands a fair place on the stage, then the rest of the world economy is going to completely crash. And France is not allowing that. They tried to get Niger involved, and come in battle. And they tried to get Benin Toga involved to come in. Some of the soldiers in Benin was like, no, I'm not going to attack my brother. But then other soldiers do. So the world is in an unsafe place. What we did in Venezuela.
What'd you think about that? Because that was a pretty surgical.
Yeah, it's very surgical,
but they had. It didn't turn into the chaotic. And his answer was more the Monroe Doctrine. Let's protect the Western Hemisphere. The Monroe Doctrine. Making sure we're good, we're safe. And America became America because we have a history of being an expansionist nation where, hey, we'll buy Florida for $4 or $5 million. Hey, we'll buy, Texas. We'll buy Louisiana. We'll buy Alaska. We'll fight for California and Arizona. We'll take, and now they're talking about, Cuba, and they're talking about, and by the way, I don't know if you saw that or not, but Panama came out with the backing of U.S. Panama came out and says, hey, China,
you're done.
You're done. That's not a bad thing because if China, I had Christine Oman this week, and I said, now that we know the virus was leaked out of China, right? And they could have done something about it. For many years, they're like, no, you can't say that. It didn't come from China. It came from somewhere else. Well, now we know it came from the Wuhan lab. It's the Wuhan lab. And they could have closed the airports down earlier. You don't think they intentionally did that to leave it open? 7 million people died. The world economy lost $16 trillion. China's not been held accountable yet. You think China's a trusted player?
China didn't work by itself with that. The U.S. was involved with that.
Who was it that was involved from
everybody
the US?
Was.
Not everybody. Who was everybody?
I think a lot of the countries that were complicit with it, the ones that immediately were like, okay, we're going to go into this lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to force this vaccination on everyone. That was a coordinated effort. That didn't happen. Hey, I think you should do this to your citizens.
But I think that was also some of the globalists and some of the establishment folks. There's a play right now. It's not the Republican and the Democrat thing.
No.
It's the globalists that want to make the whole thing a one world, a whole new world, a new world order, whatever they're calling it.
All right, let's analyze that. When someone says Bitcoin is going to die, the first thing we need to ask is, what actually kills a monetary network? Historically, currencies die for 3 reasons: loss of trust, loss of users, better technology replacing it. Now, when we look at Bitcoin objectively, none of those 3 things are happening right now. In fact, the opposite is happening. Institutional money has been moving into Bitcoin, not away from it. Over the last year alone, we've seen spot Bitcoin ETFs approved, major asset managers like BlackRock and Fidelity entering the market, large financial institutions building custody infrastructure. And that's important because institutions don't build billion-dollar financial products around something they think is about to disappear. Now, that doesn't mean Bitcoin is perfect. It still has volatility. It still faces regulation debates. And the technology itself is still evolving. But when we analyze the macro financial structure, Bitcoin right now is behaving less like a speculative currency and more like a digital settlement asset. That's why some analysts are starting to compare it to digital gold rather than traditional money. So the real question isn't simply, will Bitcoin die? The real question is, will the financial system continue integrating Bitcoin as a store of value? Because if that continues, the asset isn't disappearing. is becoming part of the financial infrastructure. And that's a completely different conversation than the one most people are having. Let me know what you think in the comments. Subscribe for more Starman Media financial breakdowns.